It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back inside the lab, everybody, for a big Thursday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, talking about a team that we haven't talked about that we really need to. It's a Boston Bruins special with a special guest. Let's get right to it. Thursday episode, baby. Let's ride.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You heard the music, and you know what time it is. It's time for the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Steele and Flip. This Thursday episode, people, is going to be one focused on a team that has torn up the NHL this season. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are going to get to big-time bets, Steele. You know we have to, because actually this board for Thursday night is one that I'm really loving. 10 games, we're going to get there. But honestly, the Boston Bruins have been doing special things this year at all ends of the ice, much to the chagrin of a bunch of different fan bases. Maybe the most important, Toronto Maple Leafs, near and dear to you and I. We're going to have a special guest, Ian McLaren, on for this breakdown, Steele, because I think really it's time to give credit where credit's due to a team that is shaping up for, they want nothing less than a cup. That's clear. And they haven't made a move yet. And I know that's one of the things you want to talk to Ian about. A lot of eyes are on this Boston Bruins team because doesn't it feel like they always go out there and get at least a piece? They really do.
Yeah, we're going to talk to Ian about this because I was going down the rabbit hole of trades and trade deadline acquisitions for the Boston Bruins the last 5, 6, even 7 years, and they always seem to make a splash right before the trade deadline comes up. So we know they're in the mix. We know that they're looking at a defenseman. Ian McLaren has broke it down on the Locked On Bruins podcast as well. So we're going to talk to him about that. A bunch of different questions, fantasy-wise, as well as just general standings in the NHL right now. The Bruins, top of the leaderboard, leading the NHL, already at 91 points on the season. Absolutely unfathomable what they've done so far at this point.
Very true. And honestly, when you look at it, and again, we're going to break it down with Ian in about 10 seconds, but they seem to just be getting it done at every every position, every angle. Like I tried to poke a hole in what the Bruins are doing this year, Steele. I can't do it. That's why we have the expert on from the Locked On Bruins podcast, Mr. Ian McLaren, former senior writer at theScore and Bruins aficionado. Let's get right to it.
Thank you for staying locked in for today's special episode. We are joined by the amazing Ian McLaren, host of the Locked On Bruins. Make sure you go subscribe, check out all of his channels and platforms. YouTube channel, Locked On Bruins. You can find him on Twitter at Locked NHL Bruins and Ian C. McLaren. Again, thank you so much, Ian, for taking the time to join us for today's episode. Like Flip said off air, we don't really get the chance to talk about the Boston Bruins as much and the Toronto Maple Leafs at the same time. Flip and I are locked and loaded with the Boston Bruins questions. You are the guy to go to when it comes to Boston Bruins. And obviously, with 9 days away from the NHL trade deadline, I know you were talking about it earlier on today's episode of the Locked On Bruins, but look, to me, the Bruins are one of those notorious teams for always being well known to make a splash at the deadline. We can look at the last couple of years, Hampus Lindholm, Taylor Hall, and Mike Riley, even a few years back, Rick Nash in 2018. I know you've been talking about Vladislav Gavrikov. Is he the Bruins' number one target for this trade and only target that you see the Bruins making this NHL trade deadline?
I mean, it seems like he's the target. I certainly hope he's not the only target, possibly. And the thing with Gavrikov is he seems like a fine player, nice guy from all accounts. Could be a good addition to the Bruins, although I have some questions about where he would slot in. Their top six right now is just when healthy. They were playing as good as any, or even better than any defensive unit around the NHL, allowing only 2.8 0.05 goals per game. A lot of that is Linus Ullmark, Jeremy Swayman, but still. My issue is more the reported asking price from Columbus's point of view. For me, if you're willing to give up a first-round pick, then I just say put all your chips out there, make it a bigger deal, and take a bigger swing at a more impactful player. Jacob Chikrin would be a dream acquisition. He's under contract for a couple more years at a very team-friendly deal. It would take a lot more than the first-round pick, obviously, to acquire him. But, if you're going to spend your first-round pick in 2023, ideally it's a 32nd overall pick, but still, I'd like to invest that in someone of a bit more substance. And it's not really even addressing a need. The Bruins are pretty deep on the left side, not very deep on the right side, forward and defensively. So that's where I would focus on at the moment if I was Don Sweeney.
I think what's the most impressive, Ian, is the Boston Bruins have put themselves in a position of obvious advantage. When you score the second most goals in the league and allow the least goals in the league, I think your front office is very comfortable going out there and investing in an opportunity to win the Stanley Cup right now. Not in a couple of years, not thinking about, how do we do it in a couple. It's right now, baby, because this team is obviously the toast of the NHL, and they're going to be making these additions. And I think what I need to ask you is, after what the Toronto Maple Leafs have done, they've sent a message to the Boston Bruins. Yes, of course. Hey, I'm not getting ahead of myself. They're going to have to get through the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that is a tall task. 3 straight cup trips for the Stanley Cup, very valuable team here. I'm not getting ahead of that. But you have said a lot on your show about the depth up the middle in Boston. And that's one of the needs that you've been hoping they've addressed over the last, year and a half, season or two. Do you think now what the Toronto Maple Leafs have going on, the Boston Bruins have to take notice? How do you think they respond? They got to be also going for a forward, I think, a centerman at least.
I would assume so, yes. Last year, obviously, the whole huge storyline all year long was, how do you fill the hole left by David Krejci when he decided to go home and play in Czechia? They're #blessed this season to have that hole filled by David Krejci himself. They were able to flip Eric Haula for Pavel Zacha, who was drafted as a center. He can't play down the middle in a pinch for the time being. He's on the wing playing with David Krejci and David Pastrnak. Charlie Coyle, perhaps a bit overpaid for a third-line center, but, to have Taylor Hall on the third line with him, that's a luxury for a team like or for any team, really, to have Taylor Hall on your third line.
Yeah.
The fourth line, they could use – I had kind of been not hoping, but a guy like Jonathan Taves, if he had been available, plug him in as the fourth line center, you're laughing, right? But
playing the parade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even Ryan O'Reilly would have been an amazing addition for the Boston Bruins. I'm not really sure what they're going to do. All the talk right now is left-hand defenseman, which I still don't really understand.
Yeah.
A forward. Probably they'd be looking more for a scoring winger. They're going to have to make some room cap-wise, and that probably means a guy like Craig Smith will be on the way out. You got to fill that hole on the third line. So I'm thinking more a guy like Ivan Barbashev would be ideal. They might look to Chicago. One. Max Domi could be a good fit.
Yes.
Those kind of additions, I think.
Yeah, and I think just this move by the Toronto Maple Leafs puts the impetus back on these teams in the Atlantic Division. Does it mean they're going to make a huge splash in the playoffs and, just run away with it? Of course not. But those teams in the Atlantic have to take notice. Look at 100%. What it's already done for the fantasy pieces around the teams that have made the move. Steele's made the points about the New York Islanders and Bo Horvat. Of course, Barzal's injury is another factor. But any player that the Bruins go out and get, They're slotting in there with some elite talent. They're in positions to succeed. That's one of the reasons why we had Ian on today's episode, because we're going to ask him some more fantasy-specific questions around the break. Any player that the Bruins go out and get right now, down the stretch, they're going to be great fantasy options. They're going to score goals. They're not going to be plus-minus liabilities because of how stingy this team is on the back end. We're going to get to big-time bets at the end of the episode, but I have to hit you with our friends from FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no sweat first bet for $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't hit. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And they let you bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. You know, Steele and I love him. Bet on that first to 20 or the tip or who scores the first points. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. Don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet for $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
This is Nick Morgan from the Locked On Predators podcast, here to let you know the following message is brought to you by Discover. Did you know you can reduce the number of unwanted calls and emails with online privacy protection, the latest innovation from Discover? Discover will help regularly remove your personal info, like your name and address, from 10 popular people search websites that could sell your data, and they'll do it for free. Activate in the Discover app. See terms and learn more at discover.com/online privacy protection.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are free and available on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you for staying locked in for today's special episode. Again, joined by Ian McLaren, host of the Locked On Bruins. Ian, you know, you make that comment, #blessed for the Bruins having David Krejci back, and obviously, it's been a huge addition to their lineup. A couple of different changes from last year. The player I want to specifically talk about, you know, just general as well as fantasy wise, is Jake DeBrusk and the value that he brings for the future of this Bruins team. Because, like you alluded to, Krejci, when he went back home to Czechia, now he's back. He's 37 years old. Bergeron's 37 years old. Marchand's 35. On the forward side of things, it's a little bit of an older team, but of course, you've got David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, a couple of young guys to kind of keep the mojo moving forward for the Bruins and the organization. But Jake DeBrusk being one of those guys, obviously requested a trade a few years back. Now he seems like he's loving playing in Boston. What type of ceiling can we see from Jake DeBrusk? Because when I'm looking at it right now, even with the injury he had this year, he's having a little bit of a career year, 33 points in 38 games.
Yeah, I mean, ever since former head coach Bruce Cassidy decided to put him on the top line with Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, he's exploded. And, I mean, rightfully so, playing with those two guys, having a career year. He missed like 17 games after scoring a couple goals during the Winter Classic. Came back. He has scored the first goal in each of the 2 games that he's played since his return, and really helped reinvigorate the power play, which was struggling in his absence. Now, looking at his ceiling per se, it's really hard to say. Obviously, he has that plumb line assignment right now. There's questions, maybe short to long term in Boston, about who those centers will be as early as next year. You know, if best case, Bruins win the Cup, you could see Bergeron, Krejci maybe hanging them up. Then who steps into that role? Is Jake DeBrusk a driver on that line? Can he produce regardless of who his line mates are? Or does he need, you know, that elite talent on his line to really produce? So it's going to be interesting to see what he's able to do kind of on his own without those kind of safety nets there. But I mean, he's got all the confidence in the world right now. He's loving life on and off the ice, which is a big change from the past couple of years, like players have been really open about, some players anyways, about struggling mentally through COVID. He was a guy who really was affected by being isolated and didn't necessarily jive with Cassidy. So he's loving life under Jim Montgomery. And I mean, I think it's reasonable to suggest he's, he could hit at least 25 on any given season moving forward.
One of the things that I looked at this team, and hey, I'm going to come on here, and I know you like this as someone who has worked beside me in the war room watching too many Bruins Leafs games. I was wrong about this Bruins team this year. I need to be honest about it. I saw Cassidy going. I thought this team was going to regress a little bit, at least defensively, and they've almost improved. And now they're just the best penalty killing team in the league, allowing the least goals. Like, seriously, hats off to what they've been able to do. And I think a lot of it comes down to, in my opinion, I don't think you can argue this, the best goaltending tandem in the league this year, right there in Swayman and Ullmark. And I'll just throw you with a little bit of a curveball question before I hit you with my last question, which is, fantasy related. I look at what you guys have, and when I say you guys, the Boston Bruins franchise, in terms of draft picks, prospects, and moving forward. I feel like the prospect pool, and this isn't like my own take, this is just a fact, isn't exactly stocked because of everything that's gone on over the last couple of years and the prolonged success of this franchise, including a Stanley Cup a number of years ago. They might have to part with one of these goaltenders at some point in the near future, Ian, if things don't go to plan. And I just wanted to put you on the hot seat because I know Linus Ullmark has been the guy this year. But I really like Jeremy Swayman. What's the goaltender that you go with for the rest of, I just need to ask a goaltending question because a lot of our listeners out there pay a lot of attention to goaltenders, and I could see Jeremy Swayman going somewhere and be an absolute number one stud. What's your take on the goaltending situation moving forward?
I mean, personally speaking, I have Jeremy Swayman on my two keeper teams, and I'm very invested in his long-term success.
Oh, so you like this question?
I do. It makes me a bit nervous thinking about how good Ullmark has been. One of the leagues I have him in is in a salary cap league. He's a RFA this coming summer.
Right.
And they're getting this performance from Ullmark. He's making only $5 million, which is insane. And let's say Swayman comes in at like 4.5 or something like that. You still have one of, if not the best goaltending tandem, making less than Sergei Bobrovsky in Florida, like as a duo, right?
Yeah, good point.
So I think this is probably a question more for when Swayman is going to be UFA eligible. He's going to have, I'm assuming that he's not going to hold out and be like, he wants his big deal now. If they can get him signed for like 2-3 years at a reasonable rate, and then once Ullmark comes off the books, they will likely invest heavily in Swayman. His next deal, I would imagine, if his trajectory continues, would be monster. So I look at, Spencer Knight, say in Florida, who highly touted, a bit slower rise at the moment. I have him on a keeper team as well, not quite as reliable. I think he was actually just sent to the minors today.
Ooh.
He's making something like 4.25 starting next season for the next couple. I would hope that Swayman can get signed to that, although he has outperformed a guy like Spencer Knight. But to make it a bit more clear, I hope that they keep this tandem together for a couple more years at least. Yes, it's tempting to flip Swayman maybe for a top line center, but
get a lot,
goaltending is just so important. And if they can have those guys locked down, if they can have them locked down for a pretty reasonable total between the two of them, I don't think you can trade either of those guys. Yeah, it's just not happening, I don't think.
I agree.
Yeah,
Steal.
yeah. Goaltending situation is so important fantasy wise. Flip and I both know that. I think, like both in the fantasy league that we're both in. I think Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman slid pretty far down in the fantasy rankings. So whoever snagged them up at that later rounds, definitely appreciating it. And like Flip said earlier in the episode, obviously, Flip and I were completely wrong on our take of the Boston Bruins this upcoming season. They have been
hasn't been the first time. Ian knows that.
Not the first time.
The first time for me.
I've heard some questionable Flip takes in my day.
Yeah, probably won't be the last take either.
Pop off at the mouth.
Yeah, it definitely won't be the last take either. But, looking at the standings right now, obviously the Bruins at the top of the Atlantic Division. For me, I know there's like 20 to 25 games left for teams out there, but the division and the playoff race is kind of concrete for the second and third teams in those divisions. Leafs are playing Lightning. It looks like the Devils will be playing the Rangers. I don't think the Boston Bruins are scared to play anyone in the first round, but if you had to choose, what team would be the least likely team that you want to see in the first round of the playoffs for the teams that are battling for a wild card spot?
Good question.
That's a very good question. Yeah. Before last night, I might have said Buffalo, but they were pretty decimated the thing about the Sabres is they have like $18 million in cap space. If they wanted to do something, while Cousins and Thompson are on lesser deals before their bigger deals kick in, if they add a goalie, if they do something big, they could be a team to be reckoned with. But and plus there's the whole rivalry there. I mean, I'm not too worried about Pittsburgh, not too worried about Washington, the Islanders, maybe if Barzal's healthy. I always, again, go back to goaltending. Which of those teams has the best goalie? You got to go with the Islanders, Ilya Sorokin.
Thank you.
They have beaten the Bruins in the past in the playoffs, in the recent past. So if they were able to squeak in, I'd probably be most concerned about them. The Senators have played Bruins pretty well this season. I don't think they're going to catch up. But yeah, just basing it solely on how important goaltending is in the playoffs, I'd say the Islanders.
Yeah, I actually really like that answer. And I think I would probably go with the same because given how good this Bruins team has been up and down, they're going into the playoffs confident. Whatever is going to happen after that, they're going in as the most confident team because they have literally taken care of business at all aspects of this game of hockey. And honestly, you're going to need a steal of a series by a goaltender, I think, to knock this Bruins team off its trajectory, which is currently taking a deep run at the Cup this year. That's why we had to have Ian McLaren on, host of the Locked On Bruins podcast. Make sure you check out Ian on Twitter. Check out the Locked On Bruins podcast across YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you find our show as well. Ian, we're going to have you back on for sure, my friend.
Please,
Thank you for joining us today and the rest of the season. If the Leafs and the Bruins go at it, you and I are going to have a few conversations.
Oh,
so,
for sure.
Again, thank you for joining us today for today's episode.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
This is David Harrison from the Locked On Commanders podcast, and this episode is brought to you by US Cellular. At US Cellular, they know phones are great, but they're not always great for us. Sure, they connect us to so much, but they also distract us from, well, us. The us that actually laughs out loud with each other instead of just texting it. That knows being in the same room doesn't always mean being together. So let's find us again by putting our phones down for 5 days, 5 hours, even 5 minutes. Join US Cellular in the Phones Down for 5 challenge. Find out more at uscellular.com/find us.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Remember, we are free and available on your favorite podcast platform. So hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love, all the support our listeners show us every single day. We are so close to 800 subs, Flip. We're almost there. I can taste it.
We're pushing.
We'll get there very, very soon. But we got to get to big time bets where the money is made. I'm coming off a hot night, 3 out of 3.
Yes.
I took the favorites, made, a little bit of a favorite parlay. Get the odds juiced up there a little bit. So I'm feeling myself. So if you don't mind, I'd like to start off with the first pick.
Please.
I am taking the Tampa Bay Lightning on the puck line against the Buffalo Sabres. Might be a little bit of a risky pick here. They're coming off an absolute stellar performance against the Anaheim Ducks, 1-6-1.
Yep.
Vasilevsky looked great. Obviously, it's the Ducks. They're one of the worst teams in the league right now, but nonetheless, they looked great. They were getting goal scoring, not from their top guys either. It was from the depth scores on the third and fourth line, and even some Zach Bogosian gets a goal. He gets on the scoreboard. So I like Lightning on the puck line versus the Sabres.
You know what, Steele? We mentioned it on the segment with Ian. The rest of the Atlantic Division is taking note now of what the Toronto Maple Leafs are doing. Kyle Dubas is swinging for the fences, and I don't think he's done yet. So I think you're going to see a big response, both on the ice and off the ice in terms of front office moves from the Tampa Bay Lightning, and as we alluded to with Ian, the Boston Bruins as well. And I think the Tampa Bay Lightning realize how critical taking home ice advantages against this Toronto Maple Leafs team. So I think we should be betting on the Tampa Bay Lightning all the way through to the end of the season. So I'm with you on this take. And also, the Tampa Bay Lightning just have also proved their worth. So don't even think my opinion on them is what it is. Just go and look up the numbers. That's it right there. Steele, the other night, I think you bet on the Nashville Predators, and they squeaked out a shootout win against the Vancouver Canucks. And hold on, though, a sec, because I just want to give the Nashville Predators their credit due against the situation they're heading into in San Jose, and that's where I'm headed with my first pick. They have points in 9 of the last 10 games against the San Jose Sharks, including 8 wins. So hit me with the Preds on the money line. Right now, also getting good odds at -137. I'm going to take that all day. They are a good team still in the second half. We've said that at length, and they have 6 wins out of their last 6 against this San Jose team. That's my first pick.
Yeah, that's definitely going to make the parlay and on the list for myself as well. I was looking at that game because of the reason why you said that, 9 points in the last 9 straight games. Yeah, so absolutely incredible. Definitely adding that to my parlay list. Second pick of the night. I'm going to take the Wild on the puck line against the Columbus Blue Jackets. I do this being a little bit of a low-scoring game. I think Jonas Korpisalo might actually be on the move before the trade deadline because he has stepped up fantastically the last few weeks.
Good point.
I think the Wild have had trouble scoring some goals. I believe all the way back till January 16th or 17th, the Wild have only had 5 players score in each of their games back all the way till January 17th. So haven't been scoring a ton of goals, or the same guys are scoring the goals at least, but it's been low scoring games. So I think it's a low scoring game, but I'm taking the Wild on the puck line. I could see this being like a 3-1 or a 2-0 type of game. But Wild on the puck line guru is here to stay for Thursday. So that's my second pick.
Interesting point about that lack of production offensively. They've scored 21 goals over their last 10 games, making me think that maybe this Wild team takes a little shot at an offensive boost at the trade deadline. # Brock
Besser. Besser.
It's got to happen, Steele. It's just so much. I know the writing's on the wall. Anyway, we're not going to get there. Lots more trade deadline coverage in the next 8 to 10 days, even reactions after the trade deadline. Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast is where you're going to want to be. Anyway, after the plug, Steele, I mentioned the Nashville Predators. I love that spot. We alluded to some of the best aging talents in the game on the episode this past week. Hans Kopitar, hello, on a heater. 14 points in his last 9 games. 7 goals. 7 assists. The Los Angeles Kings are in the top 10 in goals, and they're heading into the New Jersey Devils barn, where the Devils have allowed a lot of goals over their last couple of games. I said the Devils were going to come out and smoke the Montreal Canadiens the other night. It was the opposite. They got smoked, and they have to figure it out, Steele. Yeah. Offensively, they're elite, and they're a good team. I like what they have defensively, but they got to tighten the screws, and that's why I think they'll be also making a move. Hans Kopitar, anytime point That's my second pick of the night.
Love that as well. Kopitar has been getting it done. I was watching that Wild Kings game the other day. I was looking at the screen, 20 seconds left. Gustafsson going to get a shutout. Nope. Kopitar's there on the
Also, hold
doorstep.
on. I have to interject, not to be rude. What's your take on the silver buckets that the Kings rock? Those shiny silvers.
I
Because I
don't
love
like
them.
them.
You
I
don't
like them. I
knew
don't
you
like
were
them
gonna say that.
whatsoever.
God
I don't like
damn.
them. I also don't like the Golden Knights chrome buckets as well. I just don't think it's a good
I like the
look.
silvers, though. Anyway, my bad. That's a tangent. What else you got for the rest of your bets?
I don't know about that, Flip. I don't know about
Hey,
the
let's
chrome
put up a
buckets.
poll.
We'll put up a poll on the Twitter account.
Side bet on the poll.
Side bet. Who's in favor and who's against the chrome buckets for the Vegas Golden Knights and LA Kings? My lock of the night, I'm going to take the Rangers on the money line on the road against the Detroit Red Wings. These are two teams who have been real red hot the last 10 games.
Yes.
Rangers are 7-1-2 in their last 10. They're on a 2-game losing streak, but 7-1-2, one in overtime. And the Detroit Red Wings, who have kind of turned things around as well. They're 7-3-0 in their last 10 games, coming off a big win against the Washington Capitals as well, obviously, who were without Alex Ovechkin at the time. But two teams that are red hot. I'm going to go with the better team in this situation. Rangers on the money line for my lock of the night.
This would be one of the situations that I potentially stay away from. I like that you have the cojones to go with it. I would also maybe lean, and this is just my gut, maybe lean the under, given how good both teams have played. And now these are important games for both teams that are continually getting close to the cutoff. Obviously, Rangers and Red Wings.
I'm always scared to take the under in a Detroit Red Wings game. It usually is over the number.
Yeah, that's true, but lately, maybe not so much. Husso is playing pretty solid hockey, but again, Shesterkin been letting in a lot of goals, so maybe not. So that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is I'm piggybacking on what Steele's point was, I think, with your first pick. The Tampa Bay Lightning have heard the shot called from the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they're not going to back down. This team has actually proven over the last number of years in the playoffs, they actually get better when facing adversity. And now they're, the ball is in their court, at least in the front office. And I think we've also seen them respond already with the crucial part of the schedule and playing well. They're at home against the Buffalo Sabres. Like you mentioned, my lock of the night is the Bolts on the money line. Put this in a parlay. Minus 220, you got no money. But how about this for you, Steele, if you want me to just wrap this up with a nice bow? Points, wins for the Tampa Bay Lightning in 9 of 10 games, their last 10 against the Buffalo Sabres. Oh, wait, the Buffalo Sabres have only one win in their last 12 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And in their last 7 trips to Amalie Arena, 0 points, 0 wins. Tampa Bay blows the doors off this struggling Sabres team. I'm worried about the Sabres, Steele. This good season could be out of their grasp very quickly here.
Yeah, two teams that have a lot to play for. Lightning trying to get home ice advantage. Sabres just trying to make the postseason at all at this point. But they do have a couple of games in hand, and we'll see what happens starting Thursday night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you go check out Monday through Friday. We are available 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, available on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. And again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.